Will the Rust console version ever stop lagging? That is a question a lot of you have posed to me, and the answer is going to be different depending on what system you're running. So if you've got a console that's current gen or next gen, that's going to be your PlayStation 5 or your Xbox Series S or X, the answer is probably going to be yes, and we'll dive into that later. But if you've got a PlayStation 4 or Xbox One, the answer is going to be a lot more nuanced. So let's get into it. That's sort of the short of it. If you want to leave the video, go ahead and leave it right now. Now we're going to get geeky about it. So here's what it is. With the next gen or the current gen, whatever you want to call it, with the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series S or X, the version of Rust that is being run right now is a last gen version that has been made forward compatible, which means you're basically running the Xbox One or the PlayStation 4 version of Rust. What that means is the game has not been optimized for your systems, and there are some bugs that exist because the game's been optimized for a last gen or a current gen, whatever you want to call it, system, and that would be your PlayStation 4, your Xbox One. When Rust comes out with a dedicated version for the new consoles, you're going to have a lot of your lag issues fixed because these consoles are basically running mid to high range software in the current sort of state of things, in the current state of the world, or everything like that. So you should be getting an experience that is quite similar to what you're seeing on the PC. This is going to be what you see a lot of your favorite Rust streamers get, and someone like me, this is probably pretty similar to the graphics that you see in a lot of my videos, the videos that are not console videos. Okay, so what you're seeing right now, this is probably what you can expect, or maybe a slightly downgraded version of this is what you can expect in the coming months or year. Okay, so for the next gen, for the people who have the latest consoles, the answer is just hold on and wait and everything's going to get fixed. Now, the answer is more nuanced if you have a last gen console because there's a lot of things to consider, and basically the developers had to make some trade-offs here. A lot of people are asking, why can't you just give me a performance thing that I can check? But it's not that simple, and I'm going to dive into why. So with the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4, you've got to remember these consoles were developed in probably like the early 2010s. And they have early 2010s technology. They've got 8 gigs of RAM, which would be atrocious nowadays. If you tried to sell me a system with 8 gigs of RAM, I would not buy it. Now, I can understand why some people are still buying PlayStation 4s and Xbox Ones because they're, they give you a lot of bang for your buck and you can play a lot of really good games on them. So 100% no hate, I get it. But when you try and run a current gen or sort of a next gen game on it, the experience is going to be less than ideal. And this is what a lot of players are faced with right now. And now there is a question from PlayStation and Microsoft of whether they should be allowing this to happen because, let's be honest, one of the big sort of selling points of consoles, or at least for me, used to be that I could buy a game and know it was going to run. And nowadays that is not the case. If I want to buy a game for my Xbox One, I've got to look at videos, I've got to do research, I've got to figure out if it's actually going to run on it. Whereas in the past, or with the last gen, the Xbox 360 and 64, anything like that, I could buy a game and rest assured that that game was going to run fairly decently on my console, but that is no longer the case. Now with Rust, I don't think that's the case. We're having some lag on monuments, there's some lag around huge player structures, there's some lag when there's too many players in your field of view. There's a lot of things that are lagging the last gen or current gen consoles, and let's go into what's going on here. So basically what's happening is every console can only display so many assets or so many things, right? So think of like your room. Your room can only hold so many items. If you're a hoarder, you might stack it all the way to the top, but then it's going to be a lot harder to get through your room. Now, as you're going into these current gen or next gen games, what's happening is they're filling that room with as much stuff as they can. And you being yourself, whether you're 200, 300, 400 pounds or you weigh 150, you're walking into this room and you're having trouble navigating it. That is what your console's doing. It's going into this room and it can't navigate it. It's lagging, it's stuttering, and it's having issues because there's just too much shit in this room. And one way to fix this, like you guys probably figured, is to take stuff out of the room. This would be to take graphics out, to take things away. But the problem is when you're playing on an Xbox One versus someone with an Xbox Series S, what do you take away? So here's the problem. If, let's say, you say, we're not going to take away player models because if you take away player models, that disadvantages the current gen or the Xbox One, PlayStation 4 players, and instead you take away things in the environment like bushes and player created assets like walls. Now all of a sudden players have an advantage. They can see other players through the walls, and now the last gen, or you guys get what I'm saying. Let's just refer to the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One as last gen, and next gen is going to be the Series S, Series X, and PlayStation 5. Glad we got that out of the way. So let's say you're on the current gen console. Now you can see through walls and you can just ping people from across the map. You can see where players are. You can just get this huge advantage. So you say, okay, okay, let's take away the player models. But now the problem is the players on console players on the next gen console have the advantage because they can ping people from farther away, right? You might be running down a field. These players see you from a distance that you can't even see, and you're getting shot by no one. So then you go and you complain. A lot of people have been complaining about this. They're saying, I don't even see scientists and they're shooting me. Well, these are the issues that you'd experience on steroids if these trade-offs were discussed. So one other option would be to limit what players could create. But the problem here is now, again, you're handicapping players that have the next-gen systems, and we really shouldn't be doing that because honestly, what's going to happen as time goes on is this game is going to have more and more players on next-gen systems as more and more of us are able to get our hands on them. So what you don't want to do is trade your future potential for your current potential. And this is the issue that they're running into. Now, one thing they did do is they cut back on the amount of players on the servers. If you played on PC, you know that Rust can have 200, 400, 500 players on a server, and these servers are massive. On the current gen, the servers are way smaller, and you can have way less players. Now, the reason the servers are way smaller is because you need to load the full map into RAM. What you don't want is you don't want there to be loading times and issues with the game mid-play. The last thing I want to be doing is running from one monument to another and get this sort of load screen in between, and then someone just comes along and kills me. Because let's be honest, if that was happening, players would just camp out that line where the load screen comes in, and they just ping you again from wherever they're standing the second you cross that line and your load screen opens up. There are situations where they could pull you off the map and put you back on, but that's hard, and that sort of loses concurrency. And, you know, Rust is a game where your character is always online, and to take you offline to load in something is literally the opposite of what they want. It's the opposite of the experience they're going for. So they've got to load the whole map in. And again, now let's go back. There's 8 gigs of RAM, so they can only load a map that's so big in. This is why the maps on console are smaller. The other option that they could do, and the option that I think they're going to end up having to go with, is they're going to have to split the servers. They're going to have to be next-gen servers and current-gen servers. The current-gen servers are probably going to be exactly what you're getting right now, because the only other option devs have right now is to shrink the maps even smaller. That could be an option. They could make more of a PvP map where you spawn in with guns and stuff and the map's super small. It's more like a battle royale or something like that. That would be 100% viable, and that could make sense. This is why you see games like Call of Duty looking a lot better on these last-gen consoles, or the current-gen consoles. I forgot what we were going to call it already. You know, that's why these games look a lot better, because the maps are smaller, they can load in more assets, there's less stuff in that room cluttering it up. Or I guess the room itself is, well, bigger. It just works, okay? Just trust me on this. So they can shrink the maps and that would work. But again, you're taxing the next-gen players, right? Players who paid for the hardware, they want the full Rust experience. They want to be as close to the PC as possible. And this is why I think what's going to have to happen is, if you want to get rid of the lag problems in Rust, what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to create different maps. You're going to need to create performance maps. And these are maps that are super small, and you load in and you can play like normal. And yeah, they're just smaller maps that load better on the current-gen consoles. There's going to be sort of decent tier maps that are going to lag for console players, like, you know, Xbox One and PlayStation 4 players. And then there's going to be maps that are probably only for players who are playing on next-gen consoles. This is really the only way I could see them fixing it. But in addition to this, there are a few other things that they're going to need to do. They're going to need to lower probably the draw distance for certain players. And again, lowering the draw distance does create a handicap for players that have their draw distance lowered, because now you can't see players from as far away, and players are going to be able to get the jump on you if they have the latest or better hardware. And honestly, this is sort of the nature of the beast. There's no real way to solve this problem, because what you're dealing with is you're dealing with players who have different budgets and different hardwares. Again, this game isn't pay to win yet. We don't know if it ever will be, but it sort of is, because if you have better hardware, you're paying more to play better and you're going to be more likely to win. But there's no real solution around that. If you're complaining about it, the only real solution would be to segregate the player bases. You have one player base that is on the current-gen consoles and one player base that's on the next-gen consoles. And I think that is almost the way it's going to have to go. There's going to have to be a current-gen console server, next-gen console server, and a mixed. And then you've got cross-play and all of that, and this is going to cause a ton of issues, because the more you segregate your player base, the more players you need online to keep the game alive. If you have 1 million players and the player base is segregated in 1 million different ways, what's going to happen is everybody's playing on their own, and that's no fun. Well, maybe it would be fun, honestly, but it's just not how the game was designed. And that's what they've got to take into consideration when they're making these calls. Now, as the player base, you, the player, can, give your opinion on this, right? On videos like this or in the Discord, not my Discord. There's a link to my Discord down below. I'm not going to ban everybody. Well, I'm not going to mute everybody all at once, at least. But on the Rust console Discord, what you can do is you can talk to the devs and let them know your opinion on this. You can say, hey, is it possible that we could create a last gen and a next gen, servers that are just for players with these consoles? Would that be an option? And then could we get bigger player maps for the players who have better, tech? And maybe they'll do it. I think in the future they will have to. I think at some point they're going to have to, because here's the other thing. When it comes to lag on the consoles, it can be fixed by pulling things out of the game too, right? You pull out trees, you pull out player build items, you pull out monument items, you make everything just less cluttered. And that is going to make there be less lag on the consoles. This is why if you look at an N64 game, it has so few things in the background, so few things that you can actually see. A lot of the background is just a 2D picture. 2D pictures are easy to load in, but 3D stuff is a lot harder. It's a lot more like little corners that you've got to load in and ugly stuff like that your computer has to deal with or your system has to deal with. So they could pull stuff out of the map, but again, the problem with that now is how much do you pull out and how much is going to be allowed? How much are you sacrificing? And if we look at the update schedule, if we look at what's planned, tech tree, that's not really going to influence anything, right? Adding a tech tree isn't going to dictate whether console lags or not. But once you go ahead and you start adding electricity, you start adding horses, you start adding a lot of stuff like that, there are going to be more problems. When you add horses, now things are going to have to load faster because your character's traveling faster. When you add electricity, now there's going to be more lights and things are going to be a lot worse. And what's going to happen is at some point, players are going to be able to create structures fairly easily. This is my opinion, fairly easily using electricity and stuff like that are going to lag last gen or current gen console players. And I'm waiting for this to happen because I think this is going to be like the ultimate trap base. A player's going to come online. They're going to have their nice new console. They're going to set up some base that just has a ton of electricity, fireworks, stuff like that going off, maybe a ton of different door skins and all that to load. Current gen players or players on these last gen, whatever we want to call them, consoles, are going to go into this area and they're going to lag and they're going to get killed. And I think that's probably going to happen at some point. I think that's going to be the point where they either say, hey, we're splitting the servers, or they're going to have to introduce some sort of performance sort of setting. There are other things they could do. For instance, make it so that if you're on a console, skins don't load for you. But the problem there is they want to make money off of skins, so I don't think you're going to see that. Again, you can lower the player count, because if you lower the player count, there's going to be less items built, but you do that, there's less fun to be had. If you lower the player count, you probably have to lower the map too, and that actually could be good, because if you do both those things, it's going to run a lot better on these consoles. And yeah, that's sort of what we're stuck with right now. It's a complicated answer that I've got to give, because I don't know what the devs are planning, so I'm trying to put myself in their shoes and think everything through. Hopefully you took something from this video. It was a little bit more technical than a lot of my videos, but I do have the technical background to actually dive into this. I'm not just making this stuff up on the spot. I know what's going on with this, and if you look at the last gen console, right, if you look at the specs on that, they are abysmal compared to current gen. 8 gigs of RAM is something that you do not want, and the graphics card is something you don't want, and it's all stuff you don't want anymore. But it worked for games back then because you can optimize games for that specific hardware. The Rust devs are going to need to do a lot more of this, which is going to help a lot, okay? That's going to help a ton. But in addition, they're probably going to need to do things like scale down the map, scale down what players can create, and that is something I don't think the current gen, the Series S, Series X, or PlayStation 5 players want to deal with. So I think there's going to be a crossroads they're going to come to, and I think they're going to be coming to it fairly quickly, and I'm not sure the decision they're going to make. But by going in and talking to the devs on Discord, telling the devs what you want, you can help them influence that decision. I'm not saying spam them. I'm just saying if you jump in, you submit tickets, you say it's lagging, maybe if you've got a ticket, if you've got a bug, right, report that bug, help the devs out, and then at the bottom say, hey, is it possible to get smaller maps? Would that help with lag? I'd be willing to do that. Or maybe even have that be an option for the community servers that you can create that will lag less. This is going to require more maps to be created because right now they're not using seeds to create maps. They're not randomly generating maps. I don't know why, because servers should be able to handle that. But that's something to ask the devs. I don't know what trade-offs were done there, and I don't really know server specs as far as what servers are running. I know this game's not going to be running on anyone's console. I know that for sure. So they're running on servers. Right now, it's servers that are run by the dev team, but eventually it's going to be servers that are run by community players, right? You can rent a server and run the game on it, okay? And I think there's some options that they could include there that could help players, right? Less monuments, smaller map size, then you're going to get a better server experience for players. Make the Battle Royale game, make it smaller map size, again, less monuments, better experience for players. This is the same you see with any city or anything like that, right? Anytime a game introduces a multiplayer map that includes a huge city, think like PUBG or something like that, there's going to be lag for certain players that didn't exist before, and that's because there's more assets in that area that have to be loaded in. And with Rust and a lot of these games, you have to load the whole map now, so that just causes some issues overall. They've got to fit everything into that 8 gigs. It's a complicated process, and I don't know. Hopefully they're going to be able to fix it. The devs over there are way better at this than I am. My experience and my sort of walkthrough of this is probably lackluster compared to anything they could do, but right now they're working on fixing the game and making the game the best game possible for you, the players. So let's just give them some time, see what they come up with, but just keep what I said in mind and don't expect too much. Don't expect 60 XP. Don't expect 60 FPS on your Xbox One or your PlayStation 4 because that isn't going to happen. But probably on your PlayStation 5, your Series S or X, you can expect it. And it is going to be coming at some point. A lot of players are saying they're getting it already, but I think some of us don't have it yet. Anyways, hopefully this video was informative. If you have questions, comments, anything like that, leave them down below. If you want more of these, hit the like button. If you like the video, hit the subscribe button. You know, more people that subscribe, the more I can do this. So thank you for watching, and until next time, peace.